Hello and welcome to episode 73 of the Page One podcast. I'm Tarek.
I'm Marco, and thanks for joining us at the Page One podcast, where we like to speak to writers of all kinds about their writing careers, how they got into the industry, and try and get as many hints and tips from them as possible.
Absolutely. We've had some really fantastic guests on. Just last week, David Nichols,
Yeah.
O'Hara before that. Some folk that, personally, I've just been really excited to chat with.
Absolutely, and this week's guest is no
No exception. Absolutely.
Exactly.
This week, we're chatting with Nikki Smith. Nikki studied English Lit at Birmingham, and then she went into a career in finance, and then she kind of had that, all or nothing. This is the moment.
Yeah, it was a sort of someone on Facebook. She tells us that someone on Facebook contacted her and asked if she was still writing her stories, and that kind of inspired her to have another go at writing again, which was sort of very fateful, serendipitous thing to happen. Yeah.
And another guest who's been on one of the Curtis Brown creative courses, and we've chatted to quite a few folk who've done those, and they all really do rave about them. And it does seem like something which I think is definitely worth considering if you wanted to go down this path.
Definitely. Although I think I said this at the end of last week's episode, that there is a bit of confirmation bias in the sense that everyone we speak to has been successful. So
caveat that with everyone we've chatted with who hasn't done it has also been successful.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a number of but I think they are clearly very helpful courses. Yeah. And I like the fact that you can do sort of short ones or sort of longer ones in person, remote. So there's a lot of options there.
You kind of fit it around your work and lifestyle, etc.
We'll put a link to the I think it's CB Creative, I think is the link for the courses. If you're interested in that, we'll put that in the podcast description. But yeah, it's a great chat with Nikki, so we'll get straight into it after a quick advert for our Page One notebook. Actually, before we do that, Tarek, we should perhaps tell the listeners that our Page One notebook is undergoing an exciting facelift at the moment.
Absolutely. It's currently wrapped up in the surgery unit, getting finishing touches done. So we've taken on board everything that people have said about the initial run of the notebook, and I think we've tweaked it a little bit. We've added in. Yeah,
I like to think it's very much the same as it was, because people did find it useful, but we've just added a few things that people thought would be even more helpful. So we've put those in there, and on our Instagram and Facebook accounts at the moment, I think until Sunday this week, as the podcast episode goes out, you're able to suggest a new colour for the cover, and we will pick one of the winning colour at random, and you'll get a free Page One notebook when the new print run is done.
Have you received my entries yet, Marco? I've sent in quite a few.
It must have gone into my spam folder.
We'll check it later.
But anyway, we'll get straight into it now, and then we'll be back at the end of the podcast with a bit more chat and to let you know about next week's guest.
But for now, on with the podcast.
The blank page. To some, it's terrifying, an obstacle to overcome. But we prefer to think of it as an opportunity, a blank canvas to be filled with all of the adventures and characters in our head. So how to overcome that fear? Well, we all know the best advice for a writer is write. Seriously, get words on the page and more will follow.
But what about later, when you start trying to pull those threads of what you've written together? What about the character you wrote about way back at the start? Who was she again? What was she carrying? And where did she leave the MacGuffin that she now really needs in the third act? Think about all those top thrillers you like to read, or that amazing drama you just watched. What did they all have in common? Structure and planning.
As aspiring writers ourselves, we've tried many different methods to try and organise all the thoughts about the stories we want to tell. We've been there searching for a piece of scrap paper to note something down, or making a quick note on our phone in between meetings.
Or sometimes we'll make a note in whatever notebook we're carrying, or a document on our laptop so we don't forget that great idea. Let's be honest, it can all be a bit messy and it's easy to lose track of everything. And that's when we realised it's not just a story that needs structure and planning, but the way we gather all of our thoughts about it as well.
And so we made Page One. Page One is more than just another notebook. It's a place to put down all your ideas for your latest project, divided into easy-to-use sections that will help you plan your story, so that when that blank page comes calling, you're ready to answer. And then afterwards, once it's written, we realised you need to plan how to let people read it. So we included a section relating to submissions.
Each one is designed for one project, whether you want to write a book, screenplay, a comic, or any other kind of story. We truly believe that when you use it, it will help you get to the main event, writing your story. So we hope this helps.
We can't wait to read what you come up with.
And remember, every story starts with page 1.
Always start these podcasts with the same question, which is, did you always want to be a writer?
Yes, I did. It's taken me a while to get there, but yes, I did. I think, I loved English at school. I loved writing stories, creating stories. I ended up doing an English degree at university, but obviously with an English literature degree, that's very, very different from creative writing. Mm-hmm. And after I left university, I did write a book, which is currently in a bottom drawer somewhere in my house and won't ever be coming out again. So yes, and then I left it after that. I didn't get picked up by. I think I did have a couple of agents kind of vaguely interested, but absolutely didn't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. And then at that point, I didn't know anyone in publishing. I didn't know anyone who was an author, and I just thought, this was something that you could either do or you couldn't do. And I just thought, well, I've tried, given it a go, mm-hmm. This isn't for me. So, so after that, I went on to a career in finance and qualified as an accountant. Can you believe it? Which I think was probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, because it clearly didn't come particularly naturally or at all naturally. Then I did that, had a couple of children, and I still wrote, but just things for me, nothing mm-hmm. that I ever kind of showed anyone. And then probably about 5 years ago, I was contacted by a lady on Facebook who I'd gone to school with, who I hadn't seen since. We'd completely lost contact. And she found me somehow and just got in contact and said, how are you? And did you ever do anything with your writing? Because I still remember the stories that you used to read out in class. So that kind of gave me a bit of a now or never moment. Mm-hmm. And I signed up for a Curtis Brown creative writing course, which I started in 2017. I went on one of their kind of short courses. It was bought for me as a Christmas present. They do these kind of 6-week online things. I'm still working full time, so I unfortunately couldn't go up and sit in their nice offices. And I did a couple of those, actually, a couple of short ones, and then applied for their longer kind of 3-month course the following year. And that's when I wrote the first draft of what ended up being my debut novel.
We've chatted to a few folk who have done the Curtis Brown courses, and they do seem to be a really good source of inspiration and help, and quite a varied selection of courses. And is that kind of thing where, is it something you should do or need to do or not? But I think everyone we've spoken to says they are really helpful and they're something that they would recommend. Is that something you would agree with?
Yes, I don't think you need to do them. I don't think you have to do them. I've met plenty of authors who haven't done them and they're, amazingly successful. So it's definitely not a prerequisite. But for me, I think it gave me a chance to, learn about the industry really more than anything else. Mm-hmm. Obviously you get a chance to practice your writing skills, and I think, putting pieces of your own work out there for other people to critique is a great kind of start to being an author, because you've got to be able to learn to take criticism, which is something that I wasn't particularly confident. And I think that really helped me to do that. But also just learning about the industry, learning who agents are, what they want, what they're looking for, marketplace trends, just teaching you all about that kind of stuff. I think that was really, really useful. Yeah.
And it seems to have a tremendous, well, I suppose we're picking a very bad, this would be bad science, I suppose, but certainly the people that have been on the course that we've spoken to have done very well out of it. Actually leads, I think if you do well on it and it connects with you, it seems to open doors as well to contacts with agents and things like that. Is that what happened with you?
Yes, I mean, I think it was on the 3-month long course that I did, we had to draft cover letters to agents. It could be any agent. It didn't have to be, a Curtis Brown agent, but I mean, you're on their course, so it'd be a bit silly not to.
Yeah.
And I'd kind of done a lot of research into some of the agents that I was going to target for my novel. And so I wrote my draft cover letter to the agent who ended up actually representing me, not immediately after the course. She didn't take me on straight away. I needed some more work to do on the book, but she gave me some great feedback on that kind of cover letter. And I guess it was that first kind of introduction that, then a year later I could go back and said, look, you've read this, I think it might be something that you're interested in. And she was, which was great. So yeah.
And then after you got the agent, I think, am I right in saying it went out in submission and you got a book deal pretty quickly after that? Was that right? Yeah,
I was really lucky. I was looking up the dates, actually. I went out on submission on the 21st of January on a Monday 2019, and we had a pre-empt offer by the 30th, so 9 days later.
Fantastic. That's amazing.
It is. Well, I realise now how lucky I am. I think I didn't really, it was so new, the whole process to me at the time, and I was warned it could take a while, weeks and weeks, so I just didn't really know what to expect. So I feel very fortunate. It was lovely. Yeah.
And that was for a 2-book deal as well, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. And you said that you'd worked on was it All in Our Head was the which was your first book? That was the one that you were working on the Curtis Brown course. I mean, how much on the course, how much from what you wrote in the course did you have to rework and redraft before you felt it was ready for submission? Quite a lot. Okay.
Quite a lot, I'd say. Yes. I think on the course some things hadn't really changed. Like there's an opening prologue, and that didn't really change too much. But initially I had the characters. There's 2 characters in it. It's a dual narrative. It's written by a woman called Alison and her kind of ex-husband Jack, and I had everything in third person. I changed the whole lot to first person, and I changed, I was just a wisher about that a bit more at the beginning. One of these things that people tell you actually on the course, really make sure which perspective you're writing from. And you think, I'm going to do it like that, and then you get to the end and think, no, actually I think it's going to work better the other way around. So I changed that, and some of the structure. The book's kind of written in 3 parts, and there's a large twist, kind of a third of the way through, and that kind of changed. The twist never changed itself, but the kind of structure of the book to pull that forward a bit changed. So yes, I finished the Curtis Brown course in. It must have been April 2018, and then it took it took until when was that? Yeah, it took about another 3 months, I'd say, something like that, right. Before it was kind of finished. It wasn't finished because I then went on to do edits with my agent, and then Orion has some edits as well. But yeah.
And the first book, All in Our Head, I think the big take home that I got from it was that it was a really impressive first book, because you kind of jump right in there with its psychosis plot line told from 2 people's points of view and two different characters' heads, which is a hard thing to do. And I wondered how much research you'd done into the area of psychosis, mental illness, and stuff. Because there's that. For me, I'd always be worried about learning enough about it so I'm not getting things wrong or preaching stuff, and that kind of. The balance of that. And was that something you spent a lot of time on? Yes,
it was. Yeah, I thought it was really important to do it kind of justice. And I didn't just want it to be, I've read a lot of books where you kind of get that, there's a twist and it's a bit like, da-da, there we go. And it kind of, comes out of nowhere kind of thing. Yeah. And I didn't want anything like that. I wanted it to be a lot more kind of sensitively done and really affect the reader emotionally. So yeah, I did a lot of research. I spoke to a few people who've been through it, and watched there's programs on it, and lots of kind of websites, support websites, things like that. So yeah, I did a lot of research, and hopefully, touch wood, it's paid off. I've had a lot of well, not a lot, but luckily not a lot, but I've had quite a few messages from readers who've read it who've been through something similar and said,
oh, nice.
you know, it was spot on. So I think that's as good as I can hope for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you talked about perspective before, and I was going to ask that because both your books are thrillers, and they do have that first person perspective, and certainly the latest book, Look What You Made Me Do, is present tense as well. I mean, do you think that is very for the sort of thriller type book that you're writing? Do you think that's the best perspective to pull you into that story?
Yes, I mean, I think there's definitely something about the kind of immediacy of it, mm-hmm. and particularly, you know, if you want to get the reader inside a character's head, there's no other better way of doing mm-hmm. it. I think that, you know, third person always puts a certain distance, you know, between yourself and the reader. But it's I think it is. But then I wouldn't want to restrict myself to having to write first person books forever. So I think it can be done in third as well. But this particular story and this particular narrative, and the fact that it does deal with, you know, kind of mental illness and psychosis, I thought it was really important that the reader gets that from that character's point of view. So
I think as well, third person, like you say, sometimes there are some stories that couldn't be told in first person, I think, because of the cast of characters or whatever. It would be too confusing to jump through too many people's heads in that way. But yeah, I suppose it is just the story that you're trying to tell that will determine it. Yeah,
and I think if you've got distinctive voices, I mean, which all characters should have anyway, but, you know, in this case, you know, it was a male and female voice. It's not like that, you know, the reader could kind of get confused as to whose head they were in, kind of thing. So yeah, I think that helps as well. But you're right. I think when you go on to the kind of 5-6 characters, it gets a bit tricky.
Yeah, it's always, that's something I've always thought about, is choosing whether it's first or third from the outset. And it's easier said than done, because, you know, you can have you have that kind of inbuilt thing inside you that says, well, if I'm first person, then I'm right in their head, and I know, I can just say what I'm thinking, and it's great. But then if you've got a big cast of characters, I'm not a fan, or I've definitely read books where I've struggled to keep track of whose head I'm in right now, when it's always I did this. And yes. Although if it's done well, it does work, but it's really hard to know, I think. And
you can also have situations where, like, you need to impart a bit of information to the reader, but if it's all first person, it's difficult to do that because it might be something that's happening out with their knowledge. So
exactly, it almost changes the whole plot structure, because you have to have that person present at every event. So it's
I completely agree. That's so true. You know, there were lots of kind of times when I was writing all in a head that I wanted to get across certain pieces of information, and it was like, well, I can't, because they wouldn't know that.
Exactly.
Or they didn't think that, and that's when it becomes really frustrating. And obviously you think, should have written it the other way. But there's kind of advantages and disadvantages to both, isn't there? I think you've just got to believe. You've got to feel that, you know, as a reader, you believe in those, you know, characters, so you write them the best way you can.
Yeah. And when it comes to actually before you start writing these stories, are you someone that does plan out in detail, or are you a pantser, as they say? Do you just have the idea and see where it takes you?
Well, I'm a planner now, Marco, I'd say. Definitely. All in a head, I didn't plan so much. I think because with a debut, there's no time pressure, and you never know whether you're going to get a deal. So, and it was in my head for a long time before, you know, it kind of went to paper. So I probably did plan, but I just didn't consciously plan it. So it all kind of came out, you know, relatively well formed, I'd say. But with the second book, definitely, because you just suddenly had, well, for me, because I had a 2-book deal, I suddenly had a deadline to write to. And it really felt to me like, oh my God, I've never done this before. I mean, I know I had done it before, but it was just that feeling that you're starting all over again and you don't know what you're doing. So
you've got much less time as well to do
much less time, exactly. And that, although, you know, it's not, somebody can say to you, I mean, I had a year, my deal happened in 2019, and I knew that All in Her Head wasn't coming out until April 2020. So I had over a year really to deliver, the second one, which seems like so much time. But when you're actually writing it, not having an idea of what you were going to write beforehand, I didn't have to submit, I didn't have to tell Orion what my second book was going to be about when they kind of gave me a deal. So it was really kind of like, right, okay, got to think of an idea, and then I've got to plan it. So yes, I went back to my trusty spreadsheets from when I was an accountant, and I've got quite a rigorous planning process now of, I list out the chapters. I don't write what's in every chapter because I think that would kill the creativity process. But I think with the kind of books that I write, where they need a lot of twists and they might have dual timelines and they're often multiple characters, I just need to know that everything is going to fit into place when I'm writing, so I don't get to the kind of 30,000 words mark and think, oh my God, what am I doing? This isn't, this isn't going to work structurally. So I kind of plan out just a sentence or so about what's going to kind of happen, maybe not even in every chapter, but most of the chapters, and where I'm going to hit some of the kind of, big reveals or twists or whatever's going to happen, just to check that it's all going to kind of fit together. And I'd love to say I could then go away and write it and it was really easy. But of course, it never happens like that.
Well, I was going to ask that, because everyone that we've spoken to, even if they are a planner, they'll, as you write these things, it often will veer off the path that you thought it was going to go down, because the characters develop in a way you thought was different, or something happens. I mean, is that the same with you? So you get taken off that plan that you've got.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that there's just something about book twos as well. I've spoken to so many people who have said it's a nightmare process, and I would agree with that. I mean, it's out now, and it comes out on Thursday in hardback, and I'm thrilled with it now. But it was a long road getting there, I think, shall we say? I think it's yes, the characters do kind of go off track, even with a very kind of structured plan. But even if you have a good idea in your head about what you're writing, I think the first time that comes out on paper is a bit bleh. And you need a kind of, that's where I think my editor was great, because I showed her a kind of early first draft, and she kind of came back very nicely and said there was lots to love about it, and which basically means I think that we can definitely make a few kind of changes. So I changed lots of things. I changed the timeline, I changed where it was set, I changed some of the characters in it, so complete revision basically. But I think that might just be my process kind of going forward. I think that I'm going to want to be one of these people that needs to write a draft quite quickly, probably, just to get that story down, as if you're kind of telling it to yourself, I think. Then as you realize stuff as you go along, then you can kind of go back to the beginning and rewrite it.
Are you one of these people that we've spoken to a few authors that have said that they use that first draft almost as an extension of the planning process in a way, and they sort of know where it's going to go, but sometimes they'll even get to a scene and just sort of put placeholder text of something happen, X happens here, and jump onto the bit that they actually know that needs to happen after that, and then they go back and fill it in after. I mean, do you do that, or do you like to try and have a first draft that is, it holds together? And then obviously it'll need work.
I think I write quite linearly, if that's the word. So I do try to kind of start at the beginning and then kind of end at the end. But I know within that lots might change. But I can't often tell what it is that has to change until I've got to the end. And you can kind of put it away. I think that's the biggest thing for me, actually, is having those breaks. If I can have 2 weeks where I've put it in a cupboard and not looked at it, and then come back to it and read it, I think that really, really helps. I think that's what I'd say to anyone. I'm quite an impatient person, and I just like to kind of get on with the next thing. But I have to force myself to stop, kind of get right away from it, and then come back to it, so that you've got that kind of distance and you can see better, I think, then what works and what doesn't. And then you kind of go back and read some stuff and it's like, oh yeah, that's good, and you read other stuff and you think, yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think I'd read that you're when it comes to actually writing, you kind of, it's a 1,500 words a day, 5 days a week, and it sounded to me very much like you treat it like a job. And is that the best way to approach it in your view? Yeah,
I think for me, I felt very fortunate getting a 2-book deal, and it meant that I didn't have to work full time anymore in my kind of day job. So I kind of do a bit of freelance stuff now, but I don't have to work all the time. And so I think that means that I do want to work hard at it, and I do think of it like a job. It's obviously, I think with COVID, as for so many people, schedules have gone out the window a bit. I'm lucky. I've got 2 kids, but they're older, so they're kind of 13 and 15, so they're relatively self-sufficient. But having them at home and homeschooling is, has been difficult. So it doesn't work in the same way that it used to, but you just have to kind of get up earlier or work later and try and find, hit that kind of, I didn't do 1,500 words for a lot of the time, but I was definitely doing 1,000 just to keep it going. Yeah.
Because there's that kind of thing, that simple maths of like, if I could do 1,000 words a day, in 2.5, 3 months, I'd have a book written. And it seems so simple, and yet that 1,000 words can be so hard to get it on paper.
Absolutely, yes. It does. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? You think, yeah, I should be able to knock that out in a couple of hours in the morning, and then
exactly, you have a whole day free to sit down and relax.
I don't think that it hardly ever happens like that for me. I must say, it just doesn't. I think I'm sitting there for a long time, and I think it's because it's not just writing the words; it's thinking about how it fits in with everything else. I could easily type 1,000 words probably in half an hour if I was really quick, but it's not like that. It's kind of thinking about all the interaction, everything behind everything, that is the difficult bit.
And when you're writing your books, which obviously, as you said, have the twists in them, do you ever doubt those twists as you're writing it? Do you ever come to a point and say, wait, does this actually work? Will this twist that I'd thought of at the start when I was planning it work now with what I've got?
I haven't so far, but definitely never say never. Who knows? I think it's not so much that the twist doesn't work, but sometimes I'll feel, the characters are too flat, or, the scene just doesn't work, or, it's not believable enough. But the actual thing that I want to happen has generally happened, but I might need to go back and rewrite some of the stuff to get them there to make it feel more believable, because I don't, as I said, I don't want things that come out of nowhere, because it just doesn't, it doesn't sit right with me. I want it to, people to be invested in, and on occasion not to see it coming. I think that's the thing with All in Her Head. There is a big twist, which hopefully a lot of people have said they definitely didn't see coming, but I think that gets overused on books now. It's always on the blurbs on the back of things. You can't rely on that, because people can just invent things that come almost out of nowhere, which
but my own view with twists is that it needs to be earned in a way that when it happens, you might not have seen it coming, but then you suddenly go, oh right, okay, and things fall into place and things like that. It's if there's something that hasn't been in the book at all suddenly jumps into it, then it feels kind of like a cheap trick in a way,
Absolutely, yeah, completely.
And what's your thoughts on, as you said earlier, you kind of came to writing your first book later on in life, and is that, and obviously there's negatives here, I suppose, from your point of view, in the sense that you wish you'd done it earlier and it's a wonderful lifestyle, etc. But then is there not good stuff as well, in the sense that you've got some more real life experience to draw on, or inspiration for stuff that you've been through or your friends have been through, etc., where you wouldn't have that if you were younger?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Of course, I wish I could have done it at 21 and been one of these, new hot debuts, and, with a huge deal and, whatever. But of course, but no, I'm really glad I got there eventually. I think I really value it. And I think that having worked in another industry also gives you a great just perspective, I think, on it. I definitely value what I've got, but I think that it makes me appreciate it, kind of thing, that I've ended up managing to do something that at the moment anyway that I really, really enjoy and love, for most of the time. Of course, it's difficult when you're sat there with an empty screen in front of you and, the words don't come. But yeah, and I think you're right, life experience. I think I'm kind of reasonably calm with dealing with things which perhaps you wouldn't have had, if I'd have been 21. I think it would have been could have all felt a bit mad and things like that, but you've kind of dealt with life experiences, so I think I'm a bit more realistic about things.
And do you think as well it helps with the discipline of actually doing that 1,500 words a day? Having worked in an office job for many years, that brings the sort of expectation that this is what I have to do. So when you transfer it to writing, it can give you a discipline that I think maybe you might not have if you were 21 and just starting out as a writer.
Yeah, definitely. I do treat it as a job, and it's something that I know I need to do. So if I haven't finished my 1,500 words by 6 o'clock at night, then I'll write, and they might be a bit rubbish by then, but I'll write to kind of get it done. I think that it gives you kind of a good work ethic, I guess. And
I wonder, does it also help with, it was something that you've written online, and it was about fear of kind of failure or rejection and stuff, and I suppose the reality is that that's just a part of a writer's life, is that you're putting yourself out there constantly, whether it's agents or publishers or just readers, and is that something which you just have to have a thick skin about it and accept that there's going to be people who don't like it or you get knocked back from, etc. And is that something that's easier to work through in your head older as opposed to when you're younger and it's maybe hurts more?
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think I'm probably a lot more cynical now. I do read reviews, but I tend to kind of store them up and read them when I'm in the right mood to read them. Just because I think that, if you start off your writing day and you've read kind of 4 1-star reviews, it can down on your writing for the rest of the day. I think, definitely things like that. And I think, writing meant a lot to me. I really wanted to be a writer, and I think that's why I was almost too scared to try, because it would have really mattered to me if I'd failed at it, or when I did fail at it, when I tried writing my book after university. Whereas, being an accountant, I didn't really want to do it, if I'm completely honest. So it didn't really matter if I failed at it. So, and I think that the older you get, the less maybe other people's opinions matter to you, or the more kind of inner confidence you get to try something, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but then at least I'll have given it a go. So I don't think I would have felt like that at 25 or whatever. I think I'd have felt it was a lot more personal kind of thing. And exactly. Reviews and stuff would have probably really, really hurt, whereas now you can't please everybody. So, it's lovely when you get nice reviews, and, for the people that don't enjoy it, maybe they'll enjoy something else.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, if you're able to make a living off writing, then, everyone else's opinion be damned. You're making enough money doing what you love to have that lifestyle, and that's the most important thing, I think. Absolutely. Yeah, so true. Yeah.
And so your latest book is Look What You Made Me Do, which, as you said, is out on Thursday as we record this. Do you want to tell us a bit about that and how that came about?
Yes, it's about the dark secrets that are hidden beneath the surface of a seemingly perfect family. And the tagline for the book is 2 people can keep a secret if one of them is dead. And it's about 2 sisters, Jo and Caroline, who are in their late 30s. They've never been close whilst they were growing up. Caroline has always been their mother's favourite, or that's what Jo thinks. And then their father dies and leaves his entire inheritance to Jo. And we kind of meet the family at the funeral in the first chapter, opening kind of chapter, and suddenly Caroline realises that she wants what Joe has got, but the question is, how far will she go to get it?
And
Nice.
You said before that when you got your 2-book deal, you hadn't. This was something that you didn't have planned or anything like that. They gave you the 2-book deal, and you had to come up with this. I mean, how does that work as a process? Because if they've given you the 2-book deal, is it the same as going out on submission the first time? If you see what I mean, or is it sort of, this is my book that I'm writing, you've given me the deal, now please go and publish it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of, the further I got through the process, I kind of realised that they were looking for certain things. So I had to write a book in the same genre, which I was completely fine with, because that's what I write. I love writing psychological suspense or psychological thrillers with an emotional depth. I think that's what they say. So that's fine. And then I think it was really about the kind of themes that I was going to write about. So kind of all in her head, I guess, is kind of domestic paranoia, if you like. It's quite kind of a big theme. And so I needed to come up with something for Look What You Made Me Do, which is something along those lines. You know, I think if I'd have suddenly decided to write, I don't know, a big police procedural crime thriller, that probably wouldn't have been necessarily what they were looking for. So I wanted, the theme of this book, there's a lot of, the central kind of, I guess, theme of it is coercive control. So that's a kind of big, important topic, for me to write about, and, for women generally, really. And so, yeah, so that's, we kind of talked about that. I talked about that with my editor, and she kind of said, yeah, it sounds great. Let's do that.
And is that a conversation? Sorry, Tarek. Is that a conversation that you have then with the editor at the publishing house, as opposed to your agent, or did you run the idea past your agent first before going to the editor? I ran it past my agent first. Yes. I've got my agent Sophie Lambert at C&W, and she's fabulous. So I run my ideas past her first, because she's a good sounding board, and she'll tell me if they're rubbish. So yeah.
And is theme kind of the starting point for you when you're trying to work out the plot of your next book? Is that the kind of, you think this is what the theme I want to write about, and then you dive into what the story could be? Yes, I think that is the way that I work. Definitely, I kind of come up with a theme, and then I might have the plot even, at that point about what it's going to be, but it's my characters are really the most important thing, I think, because I think without great characters, you don't really want to read on. I want to write those books that it's great if they have a twist, and it's great if people remember the plot, but I'd love it if they could remember the characters, a few days afterwards, and things that stay with them because of that. So,
and obviously coming out on Thursday, I suppose there is the start of the lifting of lockdown in England, but both of your books have come out during this pandemic year. And how have you found that? Because obviously it's not what you would have dreamed of as a book launch and all of that sort of thing.
Yes, I am a double lockdown author, which is definitely not what I was expecting. We had, I think, before All in Her Head came out, I went up to Clay's in Suffolk with my editor I got to see it roll off the presses up there, which was
nice. That's cool.
Absolutely amazing experience. We had our yellow high-vis jackets on and went around this huge factory. It was amazing. And that we probably did on about, I think it was about the 15th, 16th of March, something like that. So we literally did that. And then 5 days later, we were in lockdown. So I think my books probably rolled straight off the presses and went straight into a warehouse. It wasn't fab. And obviously my launch, I was going to have a launch at Waterstones, and all of that got cancelled. Every event got cancelled. So from that point of view, it was a bit, tricky. but I think that it gave me some opportunities that I'd never have had otherwise. So the publishers obviously switched very much to online. Everything kind of went online. And I got to meet, there was a group of authors. We were all publishing as debuts in the pandemic. We found each other, I think, on Facebook. Started off as a Facebook group, and then we kind of got a Twitter account. So we're the D20s now, on the D20 authors on Twitter. And we've had set up loads of events and supported each other, and that's been wonderful. I think that community, brilliant. I think there's about 70 authors in the group, but there's probably about 25 of us or so who interact regularly. You know, we have a Zoom on a Friday night and a chat and celebrate each other's achievements, and that's been wonderful. I wouldn't have met them otherwise, because there just wouldn't have been the chance to. I don't think, you know, there wouldn't have been that opportunity. And I've met you know, other writers in, you know, in the other authors in the writing community, particularly the crime and thriller community, have been unbelievably supportive, because I think that they know, you know, having your debut and your second one out in lockdown isn't the ideal situation. So yeah, they've been you know, wonderful, and they've given me some great kind of, you know, agreed to read it and gave me some great quotes and things like that. So yeah, it's not all bad, but I'm hoping third time lucky 2022.
Yeah, hopefully.
Fingers crossed, you know.
I think that's quite a healthy way to look at it, though, because it's easy to get wrapped up in it and think, oh, it's just, you know, yeah, as you said, it's not what you wanted, it's not what you're expecting, it's not what it should have been. But I think twisting it around and saying, well, yeah, that's true, but on the other hand, I've also made these contacts of people I would have known otherwise, you know, and down the line, that's just going to be helpful for further books and quotes and stuff. And yeah, I think that seems quite a healthy way to look at it, and I think that's a sensible outlook. Yes, and I mean, you know, I'm lucky. My family's healthy. I'm healthy. You know, a lot of people have had it so much worse over these last couple of years. So, you know, really, I don't have a lot to complain about. But yes, I will have a party in a bookshop at some point. Might be a couple of years before we get there. Yeah.
So on that note, obviously, look, what you made me do is just coming out. But are you already working on the next one, or have you finished a draft or anything?
Yes, I've finished a draft. Actually, I've just finished a draft, and that's just gone to my agent. So we shall see what she thinks of it when she's read it. Yes.
And what's the next step? Do they have to pitch it back to the same folk who did the first book, or do you have to? Or are you going to go back from scratch and just put it all out again?
You have to, well, in my contract, I think it's quite standard that Orion will have the option to look at it first. So I think they get kind of, I don't know, 6 weeks, something like that, 6 to 8 weeks, and to see if they want it. I mean, hopefully they do. I love my editor there. She's fantastic, and they've been great to me. So yeah, fingers crossed. But if they don't, then yeah, I think we just take it out to other people.
Nice, awesome.
And how do you deal with the sort of editor's notes and stuff? Do you ever get anything back that you disagree with, or do you always think actually that is a good way to improve the story?
I think I've been lucky because yeah, anything that my editor has suggested, initially I might have a bit of a kind of like, really? After I've kind of, you know, gone away and thought about it, they are generally right. And there might be, you know, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but there might be something little kind of thing that I think, oh, I'd rather kind of keep it like that. And I know one of the proofreaders once said, I used to spell no one, N-O, and then hyphen one. And I know I was like, and I'm right, and then went and looked up and went, I'm not actually. But no, I think that, you know, that they're not trying to ruin your book for you, they're trying to make it better. So I think it's kind of looking at it it's just getting that distance again, to look at it from a different perspective. And sometimes the characters are so in your head that you think you've done something really obvious, and then somebody points out you actually haven't. You might have done it in your head, but it's not on the page. And I think it's kind of often editors are really good at bridging that gap, you know, saying you haven't made this, you know, obvious enough, or they haven't developed that relationship well enough. It might still, you know, you think you have in your head because that's what your character's doing, but it's not on paper for the reader.
Again, it's that sort of thing about distance that you were saying before as well. Just being too close to it. It's always great to get a fresh pair of eyes on it. Just on the sort of no one correction, that another one that I read from a previous guest, actually she tweeted about it, Claire Askew, said that one of her editors came back with, she'd written, I think, "You've got another thing coming." And the editor had come back and said, "You've got another think coming" is actually the proper thing. And she couldn't believe this. But actually, and I'd never heard that before either.
I know,
but apparently
it just sounds wrong.
Yeah.
It does, doesn't it?
Sound right, yeah.
I remember reading that on Twitter, actually, and being quite like, God, I would have never known that either. So, yes.
The one that I always see and hear, and it's an American phrase, I think it is when they say, I could care less.
Yeah.
Well, surely it's I couldn't care less.
Yeah, that's
if you
true.
care less, then you're caring more than otherwise. And that I'm like, am I wrong?
It's one of these things you start thinking about. Wait, hold on, let me work this out.
There's a lot of Googling when those kind of
Yes, exactly.
Little ones are like, is it? Is it? Oh God, yes, it is. Yes, yes. No, I didn't realise that. Yeah.
What was the last book that you read?
Oh, I think the last one that I read was The Last Thing to Burn by Will Dean.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, I've not read it, but I've seen it everywhere. Yeah, is it good?
It was fabulous. Yeah,
Nice.
really, really good. I really enjoyed it. It's an incredibly tense thriller.
Awesome.
Excellent.
And what about the last film that you watched?
Oh my goodness. I can't even remember the last film I watched. I tend to watch box sets more now on Netflix. So yeah, I think I'm more. I probably no, actually, it was probably Dirty Dancing or Speed, which I'm watching with my teenagers at the moment. Yes, 80s
Nice.
lockdown fest, basically.
Nice.
So yeah, something like that we watched.
I watched Speed a few months ago actually, and I have to say for me it's something with Die Hard in that sense of like it knows what it is. It's a ridiculous film, but it squeezes every last ounce of possible plot out of people trapped in a bus. It's really good.
Romancing the Stone was another one we
classic.
I've seen it for years.
Fabulous. So,
That's one good thing about I've been doing the same with my daughters, is sort of making them watch all these films that I used to enjoy and say, look, this is a great Sometimes they're not that great. That's the trouble. When you're showing it to them, you're like, oh, I remember this was much better.
Yeah, you watch it with folk and you're like, and as you're watching it, you're like, this is crap. I remember this being really good. I'm really embarrassed now.
yes, exactly. Yeah.
So on the box set front, what's the TV show that you're watching just now or have just finished?
I'm watching Your Honour.
Oh yeah.
Oh nice.
Is fabulous. Haven't finished it yet, so yeah, don't tell me the end. But that's great. And then obviously Line of Duty, along with the majority of the population.
Yeah.
And I think Monday nights is Unforgotten with it's got Nicola Walker in it, who I just adore, and I think she's fabulous in anything. So
nice.
Great series.
Excellent.
And the very, very last thing we do is a super quick fire either or, and there's no right answer apart from one. And the first one, Gone Girl or Girl on a Train?
Gone Girl.
Oh, straight in there.
TV or cinema?
TV.
Night Owl or Early Bird?
Early Bird.
Fancy restaurant or takeaway? In normal times, I suppose.
I'd say fancy restaurant. Yes, just because I haven't
so
been
long.
goodness knows how long. And yes, but I'm happy with either generally. Yeah.
Very much looking forward to someone else making my dinner and also have to do no washing up. Literally just paying someone to bring me food and take it away, and I'll go home. And
exactly.
So true.
And the very, very last one, real book or ebook?
Oh, real book. Yes.
I'm afraid that was the incorrect answer for the last one.
Tarek is the big ebook advocate.
I mean, I love ebooks.
No, it's too late now.
I do. But to take on holiday and things, I just think they're fabulous. And I do read a lot on my Kindle, actually, on my phone. I've got a Kindle on my phone, and I do read a lot on there. But there's something about holding holding pages.
I know there is. I do get that. They're kind of physical. Although some people talk about the smell of a book, which I find a bit weird. So another fan of Line of Duty there. Did you watch it? You watched the finale there, Mark?
I did. In fact, what I did was I waited until the day of the finale and then binge watched the whole thing, which I don't know. It kind of, you lose that water cooler type moment, because I think everyone was talking about it at the end of each episode leading up to it.
Marco, you're interested in one thing and one thing only: avoiding Line of Duty spoilers.
Exactly. That's why I had to do it all in the one day. Exactly.
Yeah, it's funny. I know it's been all over Twitter, and I'm not going to spoil it for people that haven't yet watched the latest series of it. But you know, it's a hard thing to end a show like that when you've been running for so long and you've got so much expectation.
Yeah,
you know, who's the bad guy in a cast of characters? It's hard to pull off.
I don't know that it is the end because there's talk of it being another series, but it's definitely like the build up. I found this in some of the other Line of Duty series as well, so that the build up is very good, the tension and everything, but the payoff isn't. It's always difficult to please everyone with the way that it all comes together.
I definitely thought the series had some really great moments in it. Like I really enjoyed the whole series, and there was some really good tense scenes. It was moved at a fair pace. I enjoyed it a lot more than the last one, I think. But the ending wasn't quite. But then I suppose it depends. If it's not the final, if it's not the end of the show, that's probably okay.
Yeah,
it's kind of moving into the final series. If it is the end of the series,
well, but it's what do they say? It's the journey.
No, it's funny, isn't it? You can watch a movie or a TV show and it can be great, and then the last 20 minutes sucks. That's the kind of thing which is in your head when you walk out of the cinema and you're like,
it's like,
it ruins it. But even though it shouldn't, because most of it was great, it shouldn't be that one.
Well, like something like Lost, of course, obviously divided a lot of people as well.
Absolutely,
and
that's probably a good example, because I do think I loved Lost, and I can appreciate the ending wasn't as good as it should have been. But I think you're right. You could enjoy Lost very much for the wonderful stuff that's in there amongst some of the padding. But
yeah, no, definitely. No, I highly recommend watching Line of Duty if you haven't done so. For our American listeners, I think you can watch it on BBC America or possibly Netflix in America. I'm not sure, but it's definitely worth catching up on. But thanks very much to Nikki for coming on to the podcast. I thought that was a really interesting episode. And
really good chat.
What she was, I mean, we talked a bit about at the start, coming back to writing after having had a career before, having gone into accountancy, and it's obviously something that you and I can sympathise with a bit, having both gone into law when what we want to be doing is writing. It's always heartening, first of all, to hear someone that's been able to come back into the writing, and also I do think you pick up that discipline and that work ethic that if you went straight into writing from when you left school or whatever, it might not be there. I don't know.
Yeah, I think having a good work ethic is really important for any job, and there's no exception for writing. I think, especially if you're, forcing yourself to sit down and get the words on the page, and also just all the kind of ancillary stuff like responding to emails and keeping dates and all that kind of usual crap,
and
which is really important, but you don't think about it.
Absolutely, it's difficult because you don't have anyone, unlike an office job, there isn't anyone breathing over your shoulder telling you to do these things, so you have to kind of have that discipline to do that yourself. But it was a really interesting chat, and obviously very unlucky to have released both books in lockdown.
Oh, well, that's
albeit
terrible timing. What a shame.
Yeah, the second book, as lockdown started to ease, so hopefully people are seeing it in bookshops. Look What You Made Me Do. You can pick that up now from your local bookshop.
Oh, what a nice phrase to be able to say after so long.
Exactly. And we've got another great guest next week. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please leave a comment down below, hit that thumbs up button, and be sure to hit that subscribe button as well, so you never miss an episode like these ones below.
And if you want to get in touch, you can always drop us a tweet in the Twitter machine, which is at UKPage1, as evidenced here. and our other social media channels are available.
Otherwise, we hope to see you next episode.
See you later.